My grandson left a large box in my basement and whispered, "Grandma, please, keep this between us. You'll understand soon." I trusted him without a second thought. The next morning, the police knocked on my door, asking about a missing woman. My heart stopped when I saw what was inside the box. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. I'm Margaret Anderson, but everyone calls me Maggie. I've lived in my 2-story house in Beaverton, Oregon for 43 years. My husband Paul passed away 6 years ago, and since then, it's just been me rattling around in this old place with my tabby cat Whiskers. My son Brian lives across town with his wife Jennifer, and their son Tyler, my only grandson, just turned 25 last month. Tyler has always been special to me. I know grandmothers aren't supposed to have favorites, but there's something about that boy. He was the one who came to visit every day when Paul was dying, sitting beside him for hours reading westerns aloud, even though his own voice would crack with emotion. He's the one who remembers my birthday without needing Facebook to remind him. He's the one who fixed my leaking roof last summer without me even asking, showing up on a Saturday morning with his tools and a smile. So when he showed up at my door just past midnight on a rainy Tuesday in March, drenched to the bone and shaking like a leaf, I didn't hesitate to let him in. "Grandma," he said, his voice trembling so badly I could barely understand him. "I need your help. Please. I don't know who else to trust." He was carrying a white cardboard box, about the size of a shoebox, sealed tight with clear packing tape that had been wrapped around it multiple times, layer after layer. His hands were shaking so violently he almost dropped it twice as he stood on my porch, rain pouring down around him. "Tyler, sweetheart, what's wrong?" I pulled him inside, away from the cold March rain that was coming down in sheets, the kind of rain that soaks you to the bone in seconds. "Are you hurt? Are you in some kind of trouble? Talk to me, honey." "I can't explain everything right now, Grandma. He looked over his shoulder at the empty street, as if expecting to see someone following him through the darkness. His eyes darted left and right, scanning the shadows. "I need you to keep this safe for me. Put it in your basement, somewhere nobody would think to look. Somewhere hidden, deep. Please, Grandma. Please don't open it. And please don't tell anyone I was here. Not even Dad. Especially not Dad." My heart started pounding hard in my chest. In all his 25 years, through broken bones and failed tests and broken hearts and everything else life had thrown at him, I'd never seen Tyler like this. His eyes were bloodshot and red-rimmed, like he'd been crying for hours. There was mud caked thick on his jeans, covering them from the knees down, and what looked like fresh scratches running down both his hands. Angry red marks like he'd been pushing through thorns or broken glass or something worse. "Tyler, you're scaring me. What's in this box? Why can't you tell your father? I promise you'll understand soon. He pressed the box into my hands with such force that I almost stumbled backward against the wall. "Keep it safe. Hide it good. I'll come back for it in a few days. Maybe a week at most. But Grandma, you have to swear to me. Don't open it. Don't tell Dad or Mom. Don't call the police. Can you promise me that? Please?" I should have said no. I should have demanded answers right then and there. I should have called Brian, or even called the police myself. But this was Tyler, my grandson, the boy I'd helped raise, the boy who'd sat with me every day after Paul died and made sure I ate something, made sure I wasn't alone. And he was standing in my entryway with tears running down his face, begging me for help. "I promise," I whispered. Before I could ask another question, before I could even hug him properly or get him a towel to dry off, he was gone, running back to his beat-up Honda and speeding away into the rain with his tires squealing on the wet pavement, fishtailing slightly as he turned the corner. I stood in my entryway for a long time, holding that box and feeling its weight. It wasn't particularly heavy, maybe 5 or 6 pounds at most, light enough to carry easily, but heavy enough to feel substantial. When I shook it gently, nothing rattled or shifted inside, as if whatever was in there was packed tight. But something about it felt wrong, dangerous, like Pandora's box in those old Greek myths, like whatever was inside could destroy everything I loved. I went down to my basement, my footsteps echoing on the wooden stairs that creaked in all the familiar places. Past Paul's old workshop that still smelled faintly of sawdust and oil even after all these years. Past the Christmas decorations we'd collected over 40 years of marriage. Ornaments from Tyler's childhood. The lights that Paul used to string up every December without fail. Past boxes of old photos and Tyler's baby clothes that I couldn't bring myself to throw away, even though Jennifer kept telling me I should donate them. In the back corner, behind a stack of paint cans from when we'd repainted the upstairs bedrooms and an old canvas tarp that was stiff with age and dust, I found a space just big enough. I set the box down carefully, as if it might explode if I wasn't gentle, and covered it with the tarp. Then I stacked the paint cans in front of it again, arranging them just how they'd been before. As I climbed back upstairs, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea, the way Paul used to make it for me when I couldn't sleep, with a touch of honey. I sat at my kitchen table, staring out at the rain hammering against the windows, and wondering what in God's name I'd just agreed to hide. The next morning started the way mornings usually do when you're 72 years old and living alone. I made my coffee, 2 scoops, just strong enough, fed Whiskers his favorite salmon pâté that costs too much but makes him purr, took my blood pressure medication with a full glass of water the way Dr. Harrison always reminds me to, and settled into Paul's old leather recliner to watch the morning news on Channel 8. That's when everything changed. "Breaking news this morning," the anchor said with that practiced look of concern they all seem to have, the kind that probably takes years of journalism school to perfect. Portland police are searching for 23-year-old Amy Collins, who was reported missing late yesterday evening by her roommate, Jessica Martinez. Collins was last seen leaving her workplace in downtown Portland around 6 p.m. on Monday. She failed to return home, and her car was later found abandoned near the Columbia River boat launch around 11 p.m. Police say there are signs of a struggle. Anyone with information is urged to contact Portland police immediately. The photo on screen showed a young woman with long, dark hair pulled back in a professional ponytail, bright, intelligent eyes that seemed to shine with life, and a smile that lit up her whole face. She was wearing a blue blazer over a white blouse and looked professional, confident, like someone who had their whole life ahead of them. Something about her seemed familiar, tugging at the edges of my memory, but I couldn't quite place where I might have seen her before. I was still trying to remember, still staring at that photo, when someone knocked hard on my door. 3 sharp raps that made me jump so badly I spilled hot coffee on my bathrobe, the brown stain spreading across the pink fabric. Through the peephole, I saw 2 people standing on my porch, a man and a woman, both dressed in dark suits despite the continuing rain. The man was tall and broad-shouldered with graying hair and a weathered face, probably in his mid-50s. He held up a badge that glinted in the weak morning light filtering through the clouds. "Mrs. Anderson? I'm Detective Raymond Foster, Portland Police Department. This is my partner, Detective Lisa Warren. May we come in and ask you a few questions?" My stomach dropped like a stone thrown into a well. I thought immediately of that box in my basement. I thought of Tyler's terrified face, his trembling hands, his desperate plea for me to keep his secret. I thought of that missing woman on the news. "Of course," I said, opening the door with hands that I desperately hoped looked steadier than they felt. "Is something wrong? Has something happened?" They came inside, bringing the smell of rain and damp wool with them. Detective Foster settled into Paul's old leather recliner, the same chair I'd just been sitting in, while Detective Warren perched on the edge of my floral sofa like a bird ready to take flight at any moment. I took the chair across from them and folded my hands in my lap, trying to look like a confused elderly woman who had absolutely no idea why the police were darkening her door. "Mrs. Anderson," Detective Foster began, his voice gentle but with an undercurrent of steel. "Are you familiar with a young woman named Amy Collins? I just saw her on the news a few minutes ago. The missing girl? That's absolutely terrible. I can't imagine what her family must be going through. I hope you find her safe and sound." Detective Foster nodded slowly, watching my face with those sharp cop eyes that probably saw through every lie he'd ever been told. "We have reason to believe your grandson, Tyler Anderson, may have information about her disappearance. He's not answering his phone, and when we went to his apartment this morning at 6 a.m., he wasn't there. The neighbors said they hadn't seen him since Monday evening. His father Brian mentioned that Tyler sometimes stays with you when he needs time to think or when things get stressful at work. Has he been here recently, Mrs. Anderson? Every instinct I had was screaming at me to tell the truth, to tell them about last night, about the box, about Tyler's fear and his scratched hands and the mud on his jeans, to tell them everything and let them sort it out. But I'd made him a promise, and I'd never broken a promise to Tyler in his entire life. Tyler? I tried to sound confused, maybe a little worried, like any grandmother would be if the police were asking about her grandson. No, I haven't seen Tyler in, it must be 2 weeks now, maybe longer. We talked on the phone last Sunday, I think it was, but he didn't mention coming over. Why would you think he knows something about this poor girl? Detective Warren leaned forward, her dark eyes sharp and assessing. They work together at Tech Forward Industries, Mrs. Anderson. Amy Collins was, an accountant in their finance department. Tyler works in their IT support division, and they share the same floor. Several of their co-workers reported seeing them having what appeared to be a very heated argument in the parking lot on Monday afternoon, around 4:30 p.m., just a few hours before Amy disappeared. The argument was loud enough and intense enough that multiple people noticed and commented on it. My heart was pounding so hard I was certain the detectives could hear it. I could feel the pulse throbbing in my neck, see my hands trembling slightly in my lap despite my best efforts to keep them still. An argument? I managed to say, my voice sounding thin and reedy even to my own ears. Tyler's never been one for confrontation. Are you absolutely certain it was him? Maybe it was someone else from the office who looked similar? Detective Warren pulled out her phone and showed me a security camera image. Even grainy and taken from a distance, there was no mistaking my grandson. There he was in the Tech Forward Industries parking lot, his face twisted with anger or fear, I couldn't quite tell which, standing toe-to-toe with the same young woman whose face had been plastered across my television screen just minutes ago. Amy Collins. Her arms were crossed defensively across her chest, her mouth open as if she was shouting something at him. That's definitely Tyler, Detective Foster said flatly, watching my face for any reaction. The timestamp shows 4:47 p.m. on Monday. Amy Collins was last seen at 6:15 p.m. leaving the building. Her car was found at 11 p.m. Tyler showed up here at your house around midnight. You said you haven't seen him in 2 weeks? I'd already told the lie. I couldn't take it back now without making everything worse, without admitting I'd been lying from the start, without betraying Tyler's desperate plea for help. That's right, I said, forcing myself to meet Detective Foster's eyes even though every instinct told me to look away. 2 weeks at least. Have you tried his apartment again? Maybe he just went somewhere to clear his head. Tyler does that sometimes when he's stressed about work. He drives up to the coast, sits by the ocean for a few hours to think things through. He's done that since he was a teenager. The detectives exchanged a long look that I couldn't quite read. Detective Warren tucked her phone away and stood up smoothly, brushing invisible lint from her dark blazer. Mrs. Anderson, if Tyler contacts you, and I do mean if, not when, I need you to call us immediately. She handed me a business card with the Portland Police logo embossed at the top. This is a very serious matter. A young woman is missing, and your grandson may be the last person who saw her alive. Every hour that passes reduces our chances of finding Amy Collins safe. You understand that, don't you? Of course, I whispered, taking the card with fingers that felt numb and disconnected from my body. I'll call right away if I hear from him. I promise. After they left, I sat in Paul's recliner for a long time, staring at nothing and trying to process what was happening. My sweet grandson Tyler, who'd never hurt anyone in his life, was somehow involved with a missing woman. A woman he'd argued with hours before she disappeared. A woman whose face would now be forever burned into my memory. And somewhere in my basement, hidden under a tarp and paint cans, was a box that Tyler had begged me to keep secret. A box he'd been terrified to have in his possession. A box I'd promised not to open. I made it until 3 o'clock in the afternoon before my resolve crumbled completely. I told myself I was just going down to check on it, to make sure it was still safely hidden. I told myself I wouldn't open it, that I'd keep my promise to Tyler. But the moment I pulled back that dusty tarp and saw that white cardboard box sitting there with all its layers of clear tape wrapped tight around it, I knew I was going to look inside. I had to know what I was hiding. I had to know what Tyler had gotten himself mixed up in. The tape was harder to remove than I expected. Tyler had wrapped it around and around, layer after layer, as if he'd been trying to seal away something toxic or dangerous. My arthritic fingers struggled with it, and I had to go upstairs to get Paul's old utility knife from the kitchen junk drawer, the one with the yellow handle that he'd used for everything from opening packages to cutting twine. The blade sliced through the tape easily. I peeled back the flaps and looked inside. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. The box was filled with documents, printed emails, bank statements, what looked like internal company memos, all paper-clipped together in neat stacks. There were several USB drives taped to the inside of the box lid. And there was a handwritten note on top, Tyler's familiar scrawl that I'd seen on birthday cards and grocery lists and homework assignments throughout his entire life. Grandma, if anything happens to me, give this to the FBI. Not the police, the FBI. Ask for Agent Ruth Bennett. Tell her about the Cascade Project. She'll understand. I'm sorry I got you involved. I love you. Tyler. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the note. The FBI? The Cascade Project? What in God's name had Tyler stumbled into? I picked up the first stack of documents and started reading. They were internal emails from Tech Forward Industries, the tech company where Tyler worked in IT support. But these weren't normal work emails about computer problems or software updates. These were emails about something called Project Cascade, discussions of payments, offshore accounts, falsified financial reports, money being moved through shell companies. And Amy Collins's name appeared over and over again in the email chains. As the company's accountant, she'd apparently discovered something wrong with the books. Something very wrong. One email made my blood run cold. Amy is asking too many questions about the Q3 transfers. We need to handle this situation before she escalates to federal authorities. Options? The response, from someone named Marcus Holloway with the title Chief Financial Officer, was even worse. I'll take care of it. She'll be dealt with by end of week. Make sure all digital records are scrubbed. The email was dated last Friday, 4 days before Amy Collins disappeared. I sat on my basement floor, surrounded by evidence of corporate fraud and what looked very much like a planned murder, and realized with dawning horror that my grandson had somehow gotten caught in the middle of it all. The doorbell rang, making me jump so hard I scattered papers across the concrete floor. For a panicked moment, I thought the detectives had come back, that they somehow knew I'd lied to them, that they'd demand to search my house. But when I climbed the stairs and checked the peephole, it was worse than detectives. It was my son Brian and his wife Jennifer, and they did not look happy. I hastily shoved the box back under the tarp, threw the paint cans in front of it, and hurried upstairs, trying to compose my face into something resembling normalcy. My heart was still racing, my mind still reeling from what I'd just read. "Mom," Brian said the moment I opened the door, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "We need to talk. Right now." They pushed past me into the living room. Jennifer's eyes were red and puffy, like she'd been crying for hours. Brian looked exhausted and furious in equal measure, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles working beneath his skin. "The police came to our house this morning," Brian continued, pacing back and forth across my living room carpet like a caged animal. "They're looking for Tyler. They think he had something to do with that missing woman from his work. They asked us all these questions. When did we last see him? Has he been acting strangely? Does he have a history of violence?" "Violence, Mom? My son!" "I know," I said quietly, gesturing for them to sit down, even though I wasn't sure my own legs would hold me much longer. "They were here too, this morning." "Did you tell them anything?" Jennifer asked, her voice sharp and accusatory in a way that immediately put me on edge. "Did you tell them about Tyler's problems at work? About him getting written up last month?" Written up? This was news to me. Tyler had never mentioned any problems at work. "What are you talking about?" Brian sank onto the couch, dropping his head into his hands. "Tyler got written up 3 weeks ago for accessing files he wasn't authorized to see. Company financial records, employee personal information, things that weren't part of his IT support job. They gave him a formal warning. His supervisor told him one more incident and he'd be fired. The pieces were starting to come together in my mind. Tyler worked in IT support. He had access to computer systems, to servers, to places in the company network that most employees never saw. He'd discovered something wrong, or maybe Amy Collins had come to him for help accessing files she needed to prove what was happening, and somehow they'd both gotten caught. "Where is he, Mom?" Jennifer leaned forward, her eyes boring into mine with an intensity that made me deeply uncomfortable. "Has he been here? Has he called you? If you know where Tyler is, you need to tell us right now. This is serious. A woman is missing, and if Tyler had anything to do with it, Tyler would never hurt anyone," I said firmly, surprised by the strength in my own voice. "I've known that boy his entire life. Whatever happened to Amy Collins, Tyler didn't do it. I'm sure of that." "How can you be sure?" Brian's voice broke slightly. "How can any of us be sure of anything anymore? My son is missing. There's a woman who worked with him who's also missing, and the police are treating Tyler like a suspect in a possible homicide." "Homicide, Mom." I wanted so badly to tell them the truth, to tell them that Tyler had been here, that he'd left something with me, that there was evidence of what was really going on. But I kept thinking about that note in Tyler's handwriting. Give this to the FBI. Not the police. The FBI. If Tyler didn't trust the police with this information, there had to be a reason. And until I understood what that reason was, I couldn't risk telling anyone, not even Brian and Jennifer. "I haven't seen Tyler," I said, hating myself for lying to my own son but knowing I had no choice. "But I know he didn't hurt that girl. Whatever's going on, there's more to it than the police understand." Jennifer stood up abruptly, her face flushed with anger. "You're protecting him. I can see it in your face. You've always protected him, always made excuses for him, even when he screwed up. Well, this isn't a bad grade or a broken curfew, Margaret. This is a missing woman and a potential murder investigation. I'm not protecting anyone," I said, even though we both knew it was a lie. "I'm just saying we need to give Tyler the benefit of the doubt until we know more." "Benefit of the doubt?" Jennifer's voice rose to a near shout. "He had a screaming match with her in the parking lot. He was the last person to see her. His car was spotted near the boat launch where they found her abandoned vehicle. What more evidence do you need? Tyler's car was there?" My voice came out barely above a whisper. That was new information. Information the detectives hadn't shared with me. Brian nodded miserably. "Security footage from a gas station 2 blocks from the boat launch shows Tyler's Honda going past at 10:47 p.m. on Monday night, 13 minutes before Amy's car was found abandoned there." My mind was racing. Tyler had left my house just after midnight. If his car was near the boat launch at 10:47 p.m., that meant... What? That he'd been there when Amy disappeared? Or that he'd gone there looking for her? "I need you both to leave," I said suddenly, standing up on shaky legs. "I'm tired, and this is too much for me to process right now. I'll call you if I hear anything from Tyler. I promise." Jennifer looked like she wanted to argue, but Brian took her arm gently and guided her toward the door. At the threshold, he turned back to look at me, and I saw tears in his eyes. "If you know where he is, Mom, please, please tell us. We just want to help him. We just want him to be safe." "I know," I whispered. "I want that too." After they left, I went back down to the basement and read through every single document in that box. It took me 3 hours, and by the time I finished, I understood exactly what Tyler and Amy Collins had discovered. Tech Forward Industries wasn't just a tech company. It was being used as a front for a massive money laundering operation. Over the past 2 years, more than $15 million had been funneled through the company from various criminal enterprises: drug trafficking, human trafficking, illegal weapons sales. The money came in disguised as legitimate investment, got cleaned through the company's complex financial operations, and came out the other side looking completely legal. Amy Collins had found the discrepancies in the quarterly reports. She'd started digging deeper, accessing files she wasn't supposed to see, asking questions that made the wrong people nervous. And at some point, she'd reached out to Tyler for help, maybe to access computer systems she couldn't get into herself. Maybe to help her copy files securely. Maybe just because she needed someone she could trust. And now she was missing. And Tyler was on the run. And I was sitting on evidence that could bring down not just Tech Forward's executives, but an entire criminal network. The USB drives were labeled in Tyler's handwriting: security camera footage, server logs, email archives, financial records. He'd copied everything, every piece of evidence Amy had found, plus additional proof he'd gathered himself. I knew what I had to do. Tyler's note had been clear. Give this to the FBI, ask for Agent Ruth Bennett. But it was already after 7 p.m., too late to show up at the FBI field office downtown. And I needed to think this through carefully. Make sure I wasn't walking into something that would get Tyler arrested before we could prove his innocence. That's when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer it, but something made me pick up. Grandma? Tyler's voice was barely audible, rough and strained like he'd been crying. Grandma, are you alone? Can you talk? Tyler. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles went white. Where are you? Are you safe? The police came here, your parents came here, everyone is looking for you. I know. I'm so sorry, Grandma. I'm so sorry I got you involved in this. Did you? He paused, and I heard him take a shaky breath. Did you open the box? Yes, I admitted. I opened it. Tyler, what have you gotten yourself into? Where is Amy Collins? Is she? Amy's alive, Tyler said quickly. She's with me. She's safe. We went into hiding because we knew they'd come after her as soon as she tried to go to the authorities. We needed time to gather evidence, to make sure we had enough proof that they couldn't make this disappear. Relief flooded through me so powerfully that my knees nearly buckled. Thank God. Tyler, you need to turn yourself in. You need to explain to the police. No. His voice was sharp, almost panicked. That's why I left the note telling you to go to the FBI, not the police. Grandma, there's a cop involved. A detective named Marcus Holloway's brother-in-law. He's been feeding them information, helping them stay ahead of investigations. That's why I couldn't trust the police. That's why Amy and I had to run. My hand flew to my mouth. Tyler, the detectives who came here, were they? I don't know. I don't know who we can trust in the police department. That's why I need you to take the evidence to the FBI. Tomorrow morning, first thing. Ask for Special Agent Ruth Bennett. Tell her about Project Cascade. She's been investigating financial crimes in Portland for 3 years. She'll know what to do with what we found. Where are you right now? Are you somewhere safe? It's better if you don't know. Less dangerous for you if anyone asks questions. Just, please, Grandma, take the evidence to Agent Bennett. And don't tell anyone, not Dad, not anyone, where it came from or that you talked to me. Please. Amy's life depends on this. Mine too. The line went dead before I could respond. I stood in my basement, holding the phone and staring at the box of evidence, and realized that I was now in far deeper than I'd ever imagined. I wasn't just hiding evidence anymore. I was a crucial link in exposing a criminal conspiracy that had already made one woman disappear, or at least made everyone think she'd disappeared. And somewhere in Portland, there were dangerous people who would do anything to make sure this evidence never saw the light of day. I carefully repacked the box, sealing it back up with fresh tape from my kitchen drawer. I carried it upstairs and hid it in the back of my bedroom closet, behind the boxes of Paul's old clothes that I still couldn't bring myself to donate to Goodwill. Then I set my alarm for 5:30 a.m. Tomorrow I would go to the FBI. Tomorrow I would tell them everything. Tomorrow I would help Tyler and Amy bring these criminals to justice. But first, I had to make it through the night without anyone discovering what I knew. I was washing dishes after my meager dinner of soup and toast when I saw the car parked across the street. A dark blue sedan with tinted windows, no one inside that I could see from this distance. But its position gave a perfect view of my front door and driveway. They were watching me. Someone had figured out that Tyler might have contacted his grandmother. Someone was making sure I didn't go anywhere with evidence that could destroy them. I turned off the kitchen light and went upstairs to my bedroom, my heart pounding with fear. Through my bedroom window, I could see the car was still there, a dark shadow on the quiet suburban street where I'd lived peacefully for 43 years. I was trapped in my own home, sitting on evidence of crimes that powerful people would kill to keep hidden, and I had no idea how I was going to get to the FBI in the morning without being followed. Or worse, I barely slept that night. Every time a car passed on the street, every time the house settled and creaked the way old houses do, I jolted awake, convinced someone was breaking in to steal the evidence or silence me the way they'd tried to silence Amy Collins. By 5 a.m., I gave up on sleep entirely and went downstairs to make coffee, peering through the curtains at the dark blue sedan that was still parked across the street. Whoever was inside that car had to know I'd noticed them by now. They weren't even trying to be subtle about the surveillance. Maybe that was the point, to intimidate me, to make me too frightened to do anything with whatever Tyler had left with me. They didn't know I was 72 years old and had already survived the death of my husband, the loss of my parents, 2 cancer scares, and raising a teenage son in the 1990s. I'd faced down scarier things than some corporate criminals in a sedan, but I still had no idea how I was going to get to the FBI field office without being followed. At 6:30 a.m., my phone rang. I nearly jumped out of my skin before I saw the caller ID. Martha Henley, my next-door neighbor and closest friend for the past 15 years. "Maggie, dear, I hope I'm not calling too early." Martha's cheerful voice chirped through the speaker. "I'm heading to my sister's place in Seattle for a few days, and I completely forgot to ask you yesterday. Could you possibly water my plants while I'm gone? I know it's a terrible imposition, but you know how Gladys gets if her orchids don't get their twice-weekly watering." An idea struck me so suddenly that I actually gasped. "Martha, what time are you leaving?" "Oh, probably around 7:30. I like to beat the morning traffic on I-5. "Why do you ask? Would you mind terribly if I rode with you? Just to the first rest stop past Olympia? I've been meaning to visit my friend Dorothy up in Tacoma for weeks now, and I thought, well, if you're already heading that direction..." "Of course, dear. I'd love the company. The drive gets so dull by myself. Can you be ready in an hour?" "I'll be ready in 30 minutes. I hung up and immediately went to work. The FBI field office was downtown, less than 20 minutes from here. But if the people in that sedan thought I was leaving town for a few days to visit a friend, they might not bother following me so closely. And Martha's silver Buick, with Martha's sweet grandmother face behind the wheel, wouldn't trigger any alarms. I dressed in comfortable traveling clothes, slacks, a cardigan, sensible shoes. I packed an overnight bag as if I really was planning to visit a friend in Tacoma, making sure to include my medications and a change of clothes. And I carefully placed Tyler's box of evidence in the bottom of my large purse, the sturdy leather tote bag that Paul had bought me for our 40th anniversary. It was heavier than usual, but not so heavy that anyone would suspect anything unusual. At 7:25 a.m., I stepped out my front door with my overnight bag, locked up carefully, and walked across the lawn to Martha's driveway where she was loading her own suitcase into her trunk. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement in the dark blue sedan. Someone sitting up straighter, paying attention. "Oh, Maggie, wonderful." Martha beamed at me. "Just toss your bag in the back seat, dear. I've got sandwiches packed for lunch and a thermos of coffee." "This will be such fun!" I climbed into the passenger seat, carefully keeping my heavy purse on my lap. Martha backed out of her driveway, chattering happily about her sister's new apartment in Seattle and some family drama I barely registered. I kept my eyes on the side mirror, watching the blue sedan. It pulled out behind us. "Martha," I said quietly, interrupting her mid-sentence about her nephew's divorce, "I need to ask you for a very strange favor, and I need you not to ask me any questions about why. Can you do that?" Martha glanced at me, her eyes sharp despite her grandmotherly appearance. We'd been friends for 15 years, and she knew me well enough to hear the fear in my voice. "Of course, dear. Whatever you need. There's a dark blue sedan following us, 2 cars back. I need you to lose them." Martha's hands tightened on the steering wheel, but to her credit, she didn't panic. "Are you in some kind of trouble, Maggie?" "Not the kind you're thinking. But I need to get somewhere this morning without being followed, and it's very, very important." For a long moment, Martha was silent. Then a slow smile spread across her face. "Well," she said, her voice taking on a mischievous tone I'd never heard before. It just so happens I spent 10 years as a stunt driver in Hollywood before I moved to Oregon and became a boring housewife. Hold on to something, dear. Before I could process what she'd just said, Martha punched the accelerator and her sensible Buick surged forward with surprising power. She wove through morning traffic with the skill of someone who'd done this 1,000 times, taking sudden turns, cutting through a gas station parking lot, doubling back on a side street, and finally pulling into a crowded shopping center and parking between two large SUVs that completely hid us from view. "A stunt driver?" I gasped, my heart racing from the wild ride. "Mostly car chases for low-budget action movies," Martha said calmly, checking her mirrors. "I don't see the sedan anymore. I think we lost them. Now, where do you actually need to go?" "The FBI field office, downtown." Martha didn't even blink. "Federal building on SW 3rd Avenue. I know it. We can be there in 12 minutes. She was right. Exactly 12 minutes later, Martha pulled up to the curb outside the imposing glass and steel building that housed the FBI's Portland field office. She turned to me with serious eyes. "I don't know what you're mixed up in, Maggie Anderson, but you be careful. And when this is all over, you're going to tell me the whole story over a bottle of wine. Understood?" "Understood," I said, squeezing her hand gratefully. "Thank you, Martha. You may have just saved lives." "Just doing my civic duty, dear. Now go. And call me when you're safe." I stepped out of the car with my heavy purse and my overnight bag and walked through the front doors of the FBI field office with my head held high, trying to project confidence I didn't quite feel. The lobby was intimidating. All marble and security checkpoints and stern-faced guards. I approached the reception desk, where a young man in a security uniform looked up at me with polite but distant eyes. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "Yes," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "I need to speak with Special Agent Ruth Bennett. It's about a case she's investigating. Project Cascade." The mention of Project Cascade made the security guard's expression shift immediately. He picked up a phone, spoke quietly into it for a moment, then gestured to a bank of elevators. "Someone will be down to escort you shortly. Please have a seat in the waiting area." I sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair and tried not to think about what I was about to do. I was about to turn over evidence that would implicate my grandson in corporate espionage, even if that espionage had been in service of exposing criminal activity. I was about to tell federal agents that Tyler was in hiding with a missing woman, that half of Portland thought might be dead. I was about to upend my entire family's life and possibly put Tyler in serious legal jeopardy. But it was the right thing to do. It was what Tyler had asked me to do. And somewhere in Portland, dangerous criminals were getting away with money laundering and God knew what else. "Mrs. Anderson?" I looked up to see a woman in her mid-40s with short dark hair, sharp intelligent eyes, and a no-nonsense FBI badge clipped to her belt. She wore a crisp white blouse under a dark blazer and had the kind of presence that commanded respect. "I'm Special Agent Ruth Bennett. I understand you wanted to speak with me about Project Cascade?" I stood up, clutching my purse against my chest like a shield. "Yes, but not here. Is there somewhere private we can talk?" Agent Bennett studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Follow me." She led me to an elevator, up to the 4th floor, and down a long hallway to a small conference room with a table, 4 chairs, and walls that were probably soundproof. She closed the door behind us and gestured for me to sit. "All right, Mrs. Anderson, I'm listening." I took a deep breath and set my purse on the table. "My grandson, Tyler Anderson, works at Tech Forward Industries. He and a colleague named Amy Collins discovered evidence of a massive money laundering operation being run through the company. They gathered proof, documents, emails, financial records, security footage, server logs, and then someone inside the company found out what they'd discovered." Agent Bennett's expression didn't change, but I saw her posture shift slightly, becoming more alert and focused. "Go on." "Amy Collins was reported missing 3 days ago. The police think Tyler might have had something to do with her disappearance because they were seen arguing in the parking lot hours before she vanished. But Amy isn't missing. She's in hiding with Tyler because they knew the people behind Project Cascade would try to kill her to keep her quiet. Tyler came to my house Monday night and left this box with me. He told me to bring it to you if anything happened to him." He said you were investigating financial crimes in Portland and that you could be trusted. I lifted the box out of my purse and placed it on the table between us. Agent Bennett stared at it for a long moment, then looked back at me with eyes that had gone very, very sharp. How do you know Amy Collins is alive if she's in hiding? Tyler called me last night. He told me she was safe and that they were gathering evidence. He also told me that there's someone in the Portland Police Department who's compromised, a detective who's related to one of the people running Project Cascade. That's why he couldn't go to the police. That's why he had to run. Agent Bennett was already pulling on latex gloves and carefully opening the box. She examined the contents silently for several minutes, her expression growing darker with each document she reviewed. "Mrs. Anderson," she said finally, "do you understand the magnitude of what you've just given me? I understand that my grandson and a young woman he works with discovered something that powerful people would kill to keep hidden. I understand that you're going to need them to testify about how they found this evidence and what they know. And I understand that you need to protect them when they come out of hiding. Where are they now? I don't know." Tyler wouldn't tell me because he said it was safer for me if I didn't know. Agent Bennett studied my face, clearly trying to determine if I was lying. Then she nodded slowly. "All right. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to take your statement, and I'm going to have our forensic accountants go through every document in this box. If what you're telling me is accurate, and if this evidence is genuine, then yes, we'll need Tyler and Amy to come in and give statements. But I can promise you they won't be treated as criminals. They'll be treated as witnesses who helped expose a major criminal operation. There's more," I said quietly. "Someone was watching my house last night. A dark blue sedan parked across the street. I had to get my neighbor to help me lose them on the way here. Whoever is behind Project Cascade knows that Tyler might have contacted me. They might know I have the evidence." Agent Bennett's jaw tightened. "Did you get a license plate number?" "No, I'm sorry, I was too frightened to think clearly." "That's all right." She pulled out her phone and made a quick call. "This is Bennett. I need a protective detail sent to—" She glanced at me questioningly. I gave her my address, and she relayed it to whoever was on the other end of the call. "We'll have agents watching your house within the hour," she said after hanging up. "And I'm going to arrange for you to stay in a safe location until we can make arrests based on this evidence. You did the right thing coming here, Mrs. Anderson. But you're also now a target. These people don't leave loose ends." The reality of what I'd gotten myself into was starting to sink in. I wasn't just helping Tyler anymore. I was actively working against criminals who had millions of dollars and apparently people inside law enforcement on their payroll. "How long until Tyler and Amy can come in?" I asked. "That depends on how quickly we can verify this evidence and get arrest warrants issued. Days, maybe. A week, at most. In the meantime, I need you to stay off your phone. They might have it tapped or be monitoring your calls. Don't contact anyone from your family. Don't go home. Let us keep you safe. My son Brian will worry. He'll think something's happened to me. We'll make sure your family knows you're safe without revealing where you are or what you're doing. Trust me, Mrs. Anderson. This is my job." For the next 4 hours, I sat in that conference room and told Agent Ruth Bennett everything I knew. Every detail about Tyler's midnight visit. Every document I'd read. Every conversation I'd had with the detectives who'd come to my door. She recorded it all, took notes, asked clarifying questions, and had me repeat certain parts to make sure she had the details exactly right. Other agents came and went. Specialists in financial crimes, technical experts who examined the USB drives, even a psychologist who assessed my mental state to make sure I was a credible witness. By the time they were done, it was early afternoon, and I was exhausted. Agent Bennett brought me a sandwich from the building's cafeteria and a cup of terrible coffee. "You're doing great, Mrs. Anderson. Just a little bit longer, and then we'll get you somewhere safe where you can rest. Have you been able to verify any of it?" "Enough to know that what Tyler and Amy found is real. We've been investigating financial irregularities at several Portland tech companies for 2 years now, and Tech Forward Industries has been on our radar for months, but we didn't have enough evidence to get warrants or make arrests. What you brought us today, this could be the break we've been waiting for." I felt a surge of pride mixed with terror. Tyler had been right to gather this evidence. He'd been right to bring it to the FBI. And I'd been right to trust him, even when everything looked damning. When can I talk to Tyler again? Can you get a message to him that I'm safe? Agent Bennett shook her head. We can't risk communication that might be intercepted, but I can tell you that we're setting up a secure channel for him to contact us when he's ready. In his note, he said he'd reach out when he knew it was safe. We'll be ready when he does. That's when the conference room door burst open and a young agent stuck his head in, his face pale. Agent Bennett, we have a problem. The car you sent to watch Mrs. Anderson's house, they just reported that someone broke in through the back door. The basement has been torn apart. They were looking for something. My heart stopped. Whiskers, my cat, he was in the house, is he? The cat's fine, the agent said quickly. Scared, but fine. But whoever broke in knew what they were looking for, and they were thorough. They emptied every box in your basement, went through your bedroom, searched your kitchen. They didn't take anything valuable. They were looking for evidence. Agent Bennett's expression had gone hard and cold. Which means they know she brought it to us. Which means we have a very short window to make arrests before the people behind Project Cascade destroy evidence and flee the country. She turned to me with intense eyes. Mrs. Anderson, I need to know. Is there anything else Tyler might have hidden at your house? Anything at all that we should know about? I shook my head. Everything was in the box I brought you. I'm certain of that. Good. She stood up decisively. Then we're moving now. I'm going to mobilize arrest teams, get warrants expedited, and we're going to shut down Project Cascade before they have time to cover their tracks. And you, she pointed at me, are going into protective custody until this is over. Within 20 minutes, I was being escorted out of the FBI building through a back entrance and into an unmarked car. 2 agents I'd never met before drove me to a nondescript apartment building across town, took me up to a third-floor unit, and told me not to leave or call anyone. The apartment was small but clean. A bedroom, a bathroom, a living room with a TV, and a kitchenette stocked with basic groceries. One of the agents handed me a cell phone. This is a secure phone, he explained. You can call Agent Bennett or emergency services, but no one else. Understood? Understood. And then I was alone, sitting in a strange apartment in an unknown part of Portland, waiting to find out if my grandson would be vindicated or if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. I tried to watch television, but I couldn't focus on any of the programs. I tried to read a mystery novel someone had left on the coffee table, but the fictional crimes paled in comparison to what I was living through. I made myself a cup of tea and stared out the window at the Portland skyline, wondering where Tyler was, if he was safe, if Amy was holding up under the pressure. At 6 p.m., the secure phone rang. Mrs. Anderson, it's Agent Bennett. How are you holding up? I'm fine. Do you have news? We've made significant progress. We've verified the authenticity of the documents Tyler provided, cross-referenced them with our own investigation, and we've obtained federal warrants for the arrest of Marcus Holloway, Chief Financial Officer of Tech Forward Industries, along with 4 other executives. We've also identified the detective who was on their payroll, Detective Vincent Crawford. He's been placed on administrative leave and is currently being questioned by Internal Affairs. Relief flooded through me. So Tyler and Amy are in the clear? Not quite yet. We still need their testimony to build a complete case, and we need them to explain how they obtained some of this evidence to make sure it's admissible in court. But yes, they're not suspects in any wrongdoing. They're witnesses and, frankly, heroes for exposing this operation. When will you make the arrests? Tonight. Simultaneous raids at midnight. We're hitting Tech Forward Industries headquarters to seize servers and additional evidence, and we're arresting the suspects at their homes. We're coordinating with the U.S. Attorney's Office to make sure everything is done by the book. By tomorrow morning, Project Cascade will be dismantled. I closed my eyes, feeling tears of relief sting behind my eyelids. Thank you, Agent Bennett. Thank you for believing me. You made this possible, Mrs. Anderson. You trusted your grandson when everyone else was ready to believe the worst. That takes courage. After we hung up, I allowed myself to cry for the first time since this nightmare had started. I cried from relief, from exhaustion, from the sheer overwhelming stress of the past 3 days. And I cried from pride in Tyler, who'd risked everything to do the right thing. At 11:45 p.m., unable to sleep, I turned on the television and found a local news channel. They were covering the normal evening stories: city council meetings, traffic accidents, weather forecasts. No mention of imminent FBI raids or arrests. At 12:17 a.m., that changed. "We're interrupting our regular programming for breaking news," the anchor announced, her professional composure barely hiding her excitement. "Federal agents are conducting raids at multiple locations across Portland tonight, as part of what sources describe as a major financial crimes investigation. We're getting reports of FBI agents executing search warrants at the headquarters of Tech Forward Industries in the Pearl District, and several homes in West Hills and Lake Oswego are also being searched. We're working to gather more information and will update you as details become available." I watched as helicopter footage showed FBI vehicles with lights flashing outside the Tech Forward Industries building. Agents in dark windbreakers with FBI printed on the back were going in and out, carrying boxes of evidence to waiting vans. It was really happening. Tyler's evidence was bringing down the people who'd tried to silence Amy Collins. My phone rang again. Agent Bennett's voice was tight with barely controlled excitement. "It's going smoothly. We've arrested Marcus Holloway, his 2 co-conspirators at Tech Forward, and the detective who was feeding them information. We've seized servers, financial records, communications devices. The U.S. Attorney is already preparing indictments. What about Tyler and Amy? Can they come in now? I was just about to call you about that. I need you to contact Tyler. Do you have a way to reach him? He called me from an unknown number. I don't have a way to call him back." Agent Bennett was quiet for a moment. "All right. When he contacts you again, and I suspect he will, now that the arrests are being reported on the news, tell him to call me directly at this number." She rattled off a phone number that I quickly wrote down on a notepad by the phone. "Tell him it's safe to come in. Tell him we have everyone in custody who was aid to him and Amy. Tell him his grandmother is very proud of him." I smiled through fresh tears. "I will." I didn't have to wait long. At 1:30 a.m., my secure phone rang with an unknown number. "Grandma? Tyler!" I couldn't keep the sob out of my voice. "Oh, sweetheart, are you all right? Is Amy with you?" "We're both fine. We saw the news. They really did it. They arrested them all? Every single one. The FBI has been raiding Tech Forward Industries and arresting the people behind Project Cascade. Agent Ruth Bennett said to call her. She wants you and Amy to come in and give your statements. She said it's safe now. She said..." I had to pause to collect myself. "She said to tell you your grandmother is very proud of you." Tyler's voice broke. "I was so scared, Grandma. I was so scared I'd gotten you hurt, or that they'd find us before we could expose them, or that Amy would..." He couldn't finish the sentence. "I know, honey. I know. But it's over now. You did the right thing. You saved Amy's life, and you brought down criminals who would have kept hurting people. That's what heroes do." "I don't feel like a hero. I feel like I just want to go home." "Then call Agent Bennett and arrange to come in safely. Give your statement. Help them build their case. And then yes, you can go home." "What about the police? Detective Foster and Detective Warren? They were looking for me for Amy's disappearance. Won't I be arrested?" "Agent Bennett says you're not a suspect in any wrongdoing. You're a witness. They know Amy is safe and that you've been protecting her. Call Agent Bennett, Tyler. Trust her the way you trusted me." I heard him take a shaky breath. Okay, I will. Grandma, thank you. For everything. For hiding the evidence. For taking it to the FBI. For trusting me when everyone thought I'd done something terrible. I will always trust you, Tyler. You're my grandson, and I know your heart. Now go. Call Agent Bennett and end this." After we hung up, I sat in that small apartment feeling lighter than I had in days. It was almost over. The arrests had been made, Tyler and Amy would soon be safe, and the truth would come out. But I'd learned enough about criminal investigations to know that the people who'd been arrested tonight would have expensive lawyers, and those lawyers would do everything possible to discredit Tyler and Amy's testimony. This wasn't over. Not really. The hardest part might still be ahead. At 3 a.m., Agent Bennett called again. "Tyler just contacted me. He and Amy are at a hotel in Vancouver, Washington, just across the state line. I'm sending agents to pick them up and bring them in safely. They'll give their statements tomorrow morning, and then we'll get them protection until the trial. Trial? How long will that take? Months, probably. These are complex financial crimes with multiple defendants and thousands of pages of evidence. But Mrs. Anderson, I need to prepare you for something. When Tyler and Amy give their statements and this case becomes public, your family is going to be thrust into a very intense spotlight. The media will want to interview Tyler, interview you, interview everyone involved. Defense attorneys will try to attack Tyler's credibility and yours. It's going to be difficult. I thought about Brian and Jennifer, about how angry and frightened they'd been when they thought Tyler had done something to harm Amy Collins. I thought about my quiet life in Beaverton, the peaceful existence I'd built after Paul died. I can handle it, I said firmly. If it means bringing these criminals to justice, I can handle whatever comes. I believe you can, Agent Bennett said, and I heard genuine respect in her voice. Get some rest, Mrs. Anderson. Tomorrow is going to be a very long day. She was right about that. By noon the next day, the story had exploded across every news outlet in Portland and beyond. FBI raids tech company in money laundering investigation. Missing woman found safe after hiding from corporate criminals. Grandmother risks life to expose criminal conspiracy. That last headline made me wince. I hadn't risked my life. I'd just done what any grandmother would do to protect her grandson and help him do the right thing. Agent Bennett brought me to the FBI field office where I was reunited with Tyler and Amy. Tyler looked exhausted and years older than the 25-year-old boy who'd shown up at my door 3 nights ago. But he was safe. He hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe, and I held him and told him over and over that everything was going to be all right. Amy Collins was a slight young woman with intelligent eyes and a quiet strength that I recognized immediately. She shook my hand and thanked me for protecting the evidence she and Tyler had gathered, for believing in them when the whole city thought she was dead and Tyler was a murderer. "We couldn't have done this without you, Mrs. Anderson," she said softly. "You saved my life." "Tyler saved your life," I corrected her. "I just helped him protect the proof of what you'd both discovered." The 3 of us spent hours giving detailed statements to FBI agents, U.S. attorneys, and forensic specialists. We explained the timeline of how Amy had discovered the financial irregularities, how she'd reached out to Tyler for help accessing secure servers, how they'd systematically gathered evidence over the course of 3 weeks. We explained the threatening emails Amy had received, the moment they realized their investigation had been discovered, the terrifying decision to go into hiding and trust Tyler's grandmother to get the evidence to someone who could act on it. By the time we were finished, it was evening again. Agent Bennett pulled me aside. "I've arranged for you to go home tonight with a protective detail. We don't anticipate any danger now that the main suspects are in custody, but we want to be cautious. Your son Brian has been calling repeatedly. He's very worried about you. I think it's time you talk to him." She handed me my regular cell phone, which had been confiscated for security purposes. I had 17 missed calls from Brian, 9 from Jennifer, and dozens of text messages ranging from worried to angry to panicked. I called Brian. "Mom!" He answered on the first ring, his voice tight with emotion. "Where have you been? Are you all right? We've been going out of our minds with worry. Your house was broken into. You disappeared. No one would tell us anything." "I'm fine, Brian. I'm safe. And so is Tyler." There was a long pause. "Tyler? You've seen Tyler? Where is he? Is he okay?" "He's here with me at the FBI field office. He's safe, and he's not in any trouble. In fact, he's a hero. He and his co-worker Amy Collins exposed a massive criminal operation, and they saved a lot of people from being victimized by some very dangerous men." I could hear Brian trying to process this, could almost see him shaking his head in confusion. But the police said they thought he'd done something to Amy. The police were wrong. The FBI knew Amy was safe and in hiding with Tyler's help. It's a long story, and I'll explain everything. But right now, I need you to know that your son did something incredibly brave, and I am so very proud of him. Brian's voice broke. "Can I see him? Can we come to wherever you are? Agent Bennett says we can all go home tonight. Come to my house in Beaverton at 8 p.m. Tyler will be there and we'll explain everything." When my family gathered in my living room that evening, Brian, Jennifer, Tyler, me, and even Martha from next door, who demanded to be included after her daring getaway driving. I told them the whole story from beginning to end. I watched their faces change from confusion to disbelief to horror to pride as they understood what Tyler had done, what Amy had risked, what we'd all been part of. Jennifer cried and apologized to Tyler for doubting him. Brian hugged his son and didn't let go for a long time. Martha raised a glass of wine and toasted, "The most exciting week of my entire boring life," which made everyone laugh despite the tension. But even in that moment of reunion and relief, I knew the story wasn't finished. The arrests had been made, but the legal battle was just beginning. And I could see in Tyler's eyes that he was carrying the weight of what he'd been through, the fear he'd felt, the knowledge that he'd been hunted by people who would have killed him and Amy if they'd had the chance. The hardest part was still ahead. The next 6 weeks were a blur of activity that transformed my quiet life into something I barely recognized. Tyler and Amy were placed in protective custody, not because there was an active threat, but because the defense attorneys for the arrested executives were already starting their campaign to discredit them as witnesses. The media circus was relentless. Reporters camped outside my house despite the FBI's protective detail. They called my phone at all hours, showed up at my grocery store, cornered my neighbors asking for comments about the grandmother who broke open a major criminal conspiracy. I stopped watching the news because I couldn't stand seeing my own face on television with speculation about my involvement. Brian hired a lawyer to represent the family's interests, and Jennifer surprised me by becoming fiercely protective of Tyler's reputation. She gave exactly one interview to a sympathetic local reporter, explaining that her son had risked his life to expose criminals, and that anyone suggesting otherwise didn't know the truth. It was surprisingly effective. Public opinion started to shift in Tyler's favor. But the defense attorneys for Marcus Holloway and his co-conspirators were fighting back hard. They filed motions to suppress evidence, claiming it had been obtained illegally through unauthorized computer access. They attacked Tyler's credibility, digging up every mistake he'd ever made, the time he was written up at work for accessing unauthorized files, which, it turned out, was when he'd first started gathering evidence, his mediocre college grades, even a speeding ticket from when he was 19. And they attacked me, suggesting that a 72-year-old woman with no expertise in financial crimes couldn't possibly understand what she'd been looking at, that I'd been manipulated by my grandson, that my testimony was unreliable. Agent Ruth Bennett warned me this would happen. Defense attorneys get paid millions of dollars to create reasonable doubt, she explained over coffee at a cafe near the FBI field office, where we'd started meeting regularly to prepare for trial. They don't have to prove their clients are innocent. They just have to make the jury question whether the evidence against them is solid, and that means attacking the witnesses who gathered that evidence. Will it work? I asked quietly. Will they get away with what they did? Not if I have anything to say about it, Agent Bennett said with a fierce smile. Mrs. Anderson, I've been investigating financial crimes for 12 years. I've seen criminals walk free because we couldn't build a strong enough case. But this time, we have everything we need. We have the documents Tyler and Amy gathered. We have the servers we seized from Tech Forward Industries. We have cooperating witnesses from inside the company who've agreed to testify in exchange for reduced sentences. And we have you, a credible, sympathetic witness who risked her own safety to bring this evidence to us. Me? I'm just a grandmother who helped her grandson. Exactly. And that's why you're going to be devastating to the defense in court. When the jury sees you on that stand, when they hear you explain in your own words why you trusted Tyler and why you brought that evidence to the FBI, they're going to believe every word. You're the prosecution's weapon, Mrs. Anderson. I wasn't sure I wanted to be anyone's weapon, but I understood what she meant. My ordinariness, my lack of any agenda beyond protecting my grandson and doing the right thing, that made me believable in a way that expert witnesses and FBI agents sometimes weren't. 8 weeks after the arrests, the U.S. Attorney's Office announced that Marcus Holloway, the chief financial officer of Tech Forward Industries, had agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. He would testify against the other defendants, revealing the full scope of the money laundering operation and naming the criminal organizations they'd been working with. Agent Bennett called me personally to share the news. "This is huge, Mrs. Anderson. Holloway was the architect of the entire scheme. With his testimony, we can tie together all the pieces, the offshore accounts, the shell companies, the money transfers. And he's already given us information about 2 other tech companies that were running similar operations. This investigation is expanding beyond anything we initially imagined. What about the others? The ones who haven't agreed to cooperate? They're going to trial. And that's where we'll need Tyler, Amy, and you to testify about how you discovered and preserved the evidence that's going to convict them." The trial was set for 4 months away. In the meantime, Tyler returned to work, not at Tech Forward Industries, which had essentially collapsed after the arrests and loss of their entire executive team, but at a new company that had specifically recruited him because of his technical skills and his proven integrity. Amy took a position with a forensic accounting firm that specialized in uncovering financial fraud, turning her terrible experience into a career helping catch other criminals. And I tried to return to my normal life, though nothing felt normal anymore. Martha stopped by one afternoon with fresh cookies and endless questions about what it had been like inside the FBI building, whether I'd met any handsome agents, and whether I thought they'd make a movie about the whole thing. "They'd better cast someone good-looking to play me," she said with a wink. "Someone who can handle a car chase scene. Maybe Helen Mirren." Despite everything, I laughed. Martha's ridiculous optimism was exactly what I needed. But not everyone was supportive. Some of my neighbors whispered that I'd put the entire neighborhood at risk by hiding evidence from criminals. Some of Brian's colleagues made comments about his family's questionable judgment. Jennifer's book club dropped her after the scandal became public, though she claimed she'd wanted to quit anyway because they only ever read novels about dysfunctional families, and she'd had quite enough of that in real life. The hardest moment came when I received a letter, sent to my home address with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a typed message. "You should have minded your own business, old woman. You've made powerful enemies. Watch your back." I turned it over to Agent Bennett immediately. She had it analyzed for fingerprints, checked the postmark, tried to trace where it had come from. Nothing useful came of it, but the FBI increased the protective detail on my house for 2 weeks, just to be safe. I tried not to let it frighten me, but I'd be lying if I said I slept easily after that. I kept Paul's old baseball bat next to my bed. Not that I'd know what to do with it if someone actually broke in, but it made me feel slightly safer. 3 months after the arrests, Agent Bennett called with news that made me sit down hard in Paul's old recliner. "We've uncovered something else, Mrs. Anderson. Something that makes Tyler and Amy's evidence even more important than we realized. The money laundering operation at Tech Forward Industries wasn't just cleaning money from drug trafficking and illegal weapons. They were also laundering proceeds from human trafficking, specifically trafficking of young women from Southeast Asia into forced labor situations here in the United States." My hand flew to my mouth. "Oh my God. We've identified and freed 18 women who were being held in various locations across Oregon and Washington. Without the financial records Tyler and Amy gathered, we never would have traced the money back to the trafficking operation. We never would have found those women." I thought about Amy Collins, about how easily she could have become one of those women if the criminals behind Project Cascade had succeeded in making her disappear. I thought about Tyler's desperate courage in protecting her and gathering evidence even when it put his own life at risk. "Does Tyler know?" I asked quietly. I told him this morning. He was emotional, but I think he needed to hear it. He needed to understand that what he did mattered beyond just catching some white-collar criminals. He saved lives, Mrs. Anderson. 18 women are free because of him. When I saw Tyler that evening at a family dinner Brian had organized, I hugged him tightly and whispered in his ear. "Agent Bennett told me about the women they found. I am so proud of you, Tyler. So incredibly proud." He held on to me and cried, and I let him, because sometimes that's what grandmothers are for. To let their grandchildren fall apart in a safe place and know they'll be loved anyway. The trial began in February, 4 months after the arrests. It was held in federal court with a jury of 12 ordinary citizens who would decide whether the evidence we'd gathered was enough to convict the defendants of conspiracy, money laundering, fraud, and a dozen other charges. I was called to testify on the third day. Agent Bennett had prepared me extensively for what to expect. She'd explained how the defense attorneys would try to make me seem confused or unreliable, how they'd ask the same questions multiple times in different ways trying to catch me in a contradiction, how they'd try to suggest that I'd been manipulated by Tyler into bringing evidence to the FBI without really understanding what I was doing. "Just tell the truth," she advised. "Answer the questions directly and simply. Don't elaborate unless asked. Don't let them rattle you. And remember, the jury is going to see a grandmother who helped her grandson expose criminals. That's a powerful narrative." Sitting in the witness box, facing a courtroom full of people including the defendants who'd orchestrated a massive criminal conspiracy, was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. But when the prosecutor asked me to explain why I'd agreed to hide the box Tyler brought to my house, I looked straight at the jury and told them the simple truth. Tyler is my grandson. I've known him since the day he was born. He's a good young man with a good heart. When he showed up at my door in the middle of the night, frightened and desperate, asking me to help him, I didn't hesitate. Not because I didn't ask questions. I did ask questions. But because I trusted him. Because I knew that if Tyler was that scared, it was for a good reason. I explained how I'd opened the box and read the documents, how I'd realized what Tyler and Amy had discovered, how I'd understood that their lives were in danger from people who would do anything to keep their crimes hidden. "I'm 72 years old," I told the jury. "I'm not an expert in finance or corporate crime or any of the technical things that have been discussed in this trial, but I know right from wrong. And I knew that what those documents showed was wrong. So I took them to the FBI, to someone Tyler said I could trust. That's all I did. That's all any grandmother would do." The defense attorney who cross-examined me was a sharp-suited man in his 40s named Richard Castellan, who probably cost more per hour than I'd made in a month when I was still working. He tried to suggest I'd been confused about what I'd read, that I couldn't possibly understand complex financial documents, that I was simply supporting my grandson without really knowing what he'd been involved in. But I'd been a librarian for 30 years before I retired. I'd spent my career helping people find information, teaching them to research, showing them how to read and analyze complex documents. I wasn't some befuddled old woman who couldn't understand what she was looking at. "Mr. Castellan," I said calmly when he suggested for the third time that I might have misunderstood the documents. "I may be 72, but I can still read. And what I read in those emails and financial reports was very clear. Your client and his co-conspirators were laundering money from criminal enterprises through tech-forward industries. They were falsifying financial reports to hide the money trail. And when Amy Collins discovered what they were doing, they planned to kill her to keep her quiet. That's not a misunderstanding. That's what the evidence shows." I saw several jurors nodding slightly. I saw Agent Bennett in the back of the courtroom give me a tiny smile of approval. When I stepped down from the witness stand 3 hours later, I felt like I'd run a marathon. But I also felt like I'd honored Tyler's courage by telling his story truthfully and powerfully. Tyler testified the next day, explaining in clear technical detail how he'd helped Amy access the company servers, how they'd systematically gathered evidence, how they'd realized they were in danger, and made the split-second decision to hide Amy and get the evidence to someone who could act on it. He was nervous but credible, and I could see the jury responding to his obvious sincerity. Amy testified the day after that, describing the moment she'd discovered the financial irregularities, the threatening emails she'd received, the terrifying realization that the people she worked with were planning to kill her. She cried on the stand when the prosecutor asked her what she would have done if Tyler hadn't helped her, and I don't think there was a dry eye in the courtroom. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned with their verdict, guilty on all counts for all defendants, I wept with relief. The sentencing hearing took place 6 weeks after the verdict. Marcus Holloway, who had cooperated with prosecutors, received 15 years in federal prison. The other defendants received sentences ranging from 20 to 30 years. The judge, A stern woman in her 60s named Margaret Sullivan made it clear in her remarks that she was sending a message to corporate criminals everywhere that using legitimate businesses to launder money from human trafficking and other serious crimes would be punished with the full force of the law. This case has been remarkable not just for the scale of the criminal enterprise that was uncovered, Judge Sullivan said, but for the courage shown by ordinary citizens who risked their own safety to expose it. Mr. Anderson and Ms. Collins are examples of the kind of civic responsibility we should all aspire to. And Mrs. Margaret Anderson deserves recognition for her crucial role in ensuring that the evidence they gathered reached the proper authorities. Justice has been served today in no small part because of her bravery. After the hearing, there was a small press conference where the U.S. Attorney praised the investigation and thanked everyone involved. Tyler and Amy stood together, holding hands and looking relieved that it was finally over. Agent Ruth Bennett stood with them, professional and proud. I stayed in the background, not wanting attention, but a reporter spotted me and called out a question. Mrs. Anderson, what would you say to other people who find themselves in a situation where they have to choose between protecting a loved one and doing what's right? I thought about it for a moment, then stepped forward to the microphones. I'd say that protecting someone you love and doing what's right don't have to be opposing choices. When Tyler came to me for help, I protected him by helping him do the right thing, by making sure the evidence he and Amy risked their lives to gather wasn't hidden or destroyed, but was put into the hands of people who could use it to bring criminals to justice. That's what love looks like sometimes. Not hiding the truth, but helping it come to light. The quote was picked up by news outlets across the country. For a few weeks, I was mildly famous, the grandmother who'd helped crack a major criminal case. But fame is fleeting, and I was grateful when the media attention faded, and I could return to my quiet life in Beaverton. Well, mostly quiet. Martha insisted on throwing a Justice Has Been Served party in her backyard, complete with a banner and a cake shaped like a gavel. It was ridiculous and wonderful and exactly what all of us needed after months of stress and fear. Tyler started seeing a therapist to help him process the trauma of what he'd been through. Brian and Jennifer became much more involved in his life, checking in regularly and making sure he knew they supported him. Amy took a job with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, working directly with Agent Bennett to help investigate other cases of corporate fraud. And me? I went back to my routines, my morning coffee, my afternoon walks, my weekly phone calls with old friends, my volunteer work at the local library. But I was different now, and I knew it. I'd discovered that even at 72, I was capable of more courage than I'd thought. I'd learned that doing the right thing sometimes requires risking everything. And I'd learned that the wisdom and strength that come with age are not weaknesses, but powerful tools when wielded with purpose. 6 months after the trial ended, Tyler came to visit on a Sunday afternoon. We sat on my front porch, drinking lemonade and watching the neighbors mow their lawns and wash their cars, doing all the ordinary things that make up ordinary lives. "Grandma," Tyler said quietly, "I never properly thanked you for what you did, for trusting me when everyone else thought I'd done something terrible, for risking your safety to get that evidence to the FBI, for testifying at the trial. I don't think I could have gotten through any of this without you." I took his hand and squeezed it gently. "Tyler, you don't need to thank me. You're my grandson. I'll always be there for you when you need me. That's what family means. But you did more than just be there. You were brave, braver than I was." I shook my head. "You were the brave one, sweetheart. You saw something wrong and you had the courage to gather evidence and expose it, knowing it would put you in danger. You protected Amy when she had nowhere else to turn. You risked everything to do the right thing. I just helped make sure your courage wasn't wasted." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun sink lower toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't come to you that night?" Tyler asked. "If I'd tried to handle it alone, or if I'd gone to the police instead of the FBI?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "And I'm grateful every day that you trusted me enough to ask for help. But Tyler, I think you need to stop dwelling on the what-ifs and the what-could-have-beens. You made the choices you made, and they were good choices. They were brave choices. 18 women are free because of you. Criminals who would have kept victimizing people are in prison because of you. That's what matters. Agent Bennett told me the FBI is offering me a job as a consultant. They want me to help them investigate other tech companies that might be involved in similar schemes. They say my skills and experience could be valuable. What did you tell her? I told her I'd think about it. He looked at me with uncertain eyes. Part of me wants to just put all of this behind me and go back to a normal life. But another part of me thinks that maybe this is what I'm supposed to do. Use what happened to help prevent it from happening to other people. I smiled and patted his hand. Then I think you already know your answer, Tyler. You've never been someone who can turn away from injustice once you've seen it. That's one of the things I love most about you. If you want to help the FBI catch more criminals, I think you'd be wonderful at it. And if you want to walk away and build a quiet life, that's wonderful too. Either choice is valid. Either choice is brave. What would you do? If you were me? I thought about the past 6 months, about the fear and the danger and the stress. I thought about the moment I'd stood on the witness stand and looked those defendants in the eye and told the truth about what they'd done. I thought about the 18 women who'd been freed, the justice that had been served, the knowledge that I'd been part of something bigger than myself. I'd do it, I said finally. I'd take the FBI job. Because, Tyler, you have a gift. Not just your technical skills, but your courage and your integrity and your unwillingness to let injustice go unchallenged. The world needs more people like you. If you have the chance to use your gifts to help others, to stop criminals, to seek justice, I think you should take it. Tyler was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Yeah, I think I will. 3 months later, Tyler officially joined the FBI as a technical consultant specializing in financial crimes and cyber investigations. He worked closely with Agent Bennett, who'd become something of a mentor to him, and he helped crack 2 more major cases in his first year. Amy and Tyler stayed close friends, though they never became romantic partners despite what some of the media reports had speculated. She told me once that they'd been through too much together to risk ruining it with romance. And I thought that showed remarkable wisdom for someone so young. As for me, I settled back into my life, but I was changed. I started volunteering with a nonprofit that helped victims of human trafficking, using my experience to raise awareness and funds for their programs. I became a mentor to other older women, encouraging them to recognize their own strength and value in a world that too often dismisses people once they reach a certain age. And I kept Paul's old baseball bat by my bed, not because I was afraid anymore, but because it reminded me that I was capable of protecting myself and the people I loved, that I wasn't just a quiet grandmother living out my remaining years in comfortable obscurity. I was Margaret Maggie Anderson, and I'd helped bring down a criminal empire. 1 year after the trial ended, Agent Ruth Bennett came to visit me at my home. She'd been promoted to supervisory special agent, and was now running the entire financial crimes division for the Portland field office. We sat in my living room, drinking tea and talking about Tyler's progress and Amy's success, and the ripple effects of the Project Cascade investigation that were still unfolding. Mrs. Anderson, Agent Bennett said, setting down her teacup and looking at me with serious eyes. I wanted to come here personally to tell you something. The arrests and convictions we secured in the Project Cascade case have led to 14 additional investigations across 6 states. We've identified more than 40 companies that were being used for similar money laundering operations. We've freed more than 70 trafficking victims. We've seized over $300 million in illegal proceeds. And it all started because you trusted your grandson and brought that box of evidence to me. I felt tears sting my eyes. 70 victims? 70 that we know of so far, and we're still investigating. You saved lives, Mrs. Anderson. Dozens of them. Maybe more. I wanted you to know that. I thought about the threatening letter I'd received, about the sleepless nights and the fear and the stress. I thought about standing on that witness stand and being cross-examined by hostile attorneys trying to make me look foolish or unreliable. I thought about every difficult moment of the past year, and I thought about 70 people, 70 human beings who were free because Tyler and Amy had been brave, and because I'd helped them. Thank you for telling me, I whispered. It helps. It helps to know that it all mattered. it mattered more than you know. After Agent Bennett left, I sat in Paul's old recliner and thought about the journey I'd been on. From the moment Tyler had shown up at my door with that sealed box to this moment, sitting in my living room knowing that 70 people were free because of choices I'd made, I thought about what I'd learned about myself. That courage doesn't disappear with age, that wisdom is a form of strength, that doing the right thing often requires risking everything comfortable and safe. I thought about Tyler, about how proud Paul would have been of his grandson, about how grateful I was that Tyler had trusted me in his darkest moment. And I thought about all the women out there, women my age, women who'd been dismissed or overlooked or told they no longer had value, who had no idea how much strength and courage they possessed. I picked up my phone and called the local newspaper. When the reporter answered, I said, "My name is Margaret Anderson, and I have a story I'd like to tell. Not about the trial or the criminals or the FBI investigation. About what it means to be an older woman in America, and why we matter more than society wants us to believe." The article ran 3 weeks later, and it sparked a conversation that rippled through communities across the country. I started getting letters from women in their 60s, 70s, 80s, telling me their own stories of courage and strength and resilience. I started a blog, with Tyler's technical help, where I wrote about aging, wisdom, and the power of refusing to be invisible. It wasn't the life I'd expected to be living at 72, but it was a good life, a meaningful life, a life that mattered. And when I lay down to sleep at night in the house Paul and I had shared for 43 years, I felt his presence somehow, felt his pride in what I'd accomplished, felt his love surrounding me like a warm blanket. "I did good, didn't I, Paul?" I'd whisper into the darkness, and in the quiet of my heart, I'd hear his answer. "You always did, Maggie. You always did. Now tell me, what would you have done in my place? Tell me in the comments." Thanks for watching the video, and don't forget to check out the one that appears on your screen now. I'm sure it will surprise you.